Hello, and welcome to the first required video lecture for the course. I'm Dr. Jonina Anderson Lopez. I'll be grading and facilitating your assignments. It's possible another instructor is facilitating the course, and if so, please review the lecture portions of this video, noting that the details about assignments might be different from what you see in the module. Additionally, if you're confused about navigating the course, I suggest watching the course navigation video, which you can find in the Start Here module. So let's talk about week one, which is about the basics of crime fiction, starting with the rise of detective fiction, origins, the 19th century, and we'll end this lecture discussing the assignments for week one. To begin, let's discuss some of the factors that contributed to the rise of detective fiction, like what you see bullet point listed in bullet points on the screen. There's the development of science. The scientific advances of the 19th century, including the study of criminal behavior, forensic science, and fingerprinting, provided new tools for solving crimes that could be incorporated into detective stories. There were also social and political changes. The Industrial Revolution and urbanization created new social problems and new opportunities for crime. Detective stories provided a way for readers to explore and understand these changes. The popularity of serialized fiction gave rise to this genre. Many detective stories were first published as serialized stories in newspapers and magazines, allowing for cliffhangers and suspenseful endings that kept readers coming back for more. What are some of the ancient origins of detective fiction? Let's talk about that. While the modern detective fiction genre is generally considered to have emerged in the 19th century, there are several examples of detective stories and investigations from ancient civilizations that have influenced detective fiction. One of the earliest examples of detective fiction comes from ancient China, the Judge Dee stories, written in the 18th century by a Chinese author named Robert Van Gulik, based on an actual Tang Dynasty judge named Di Ren Ji. These stories followed Judge Dee as he solved crimes and brought criminals to justice using his wit and knowledge of the law to uncover clues and solve mysteries. Another ancient example of detective fiction can be found in the plays of the Greek playwright Sophocles. In his play, Oedipus Rex, the titular character is a detective of sorts trying to uncover the truth behind a murder in the city of Thebes. The Roman poet Ovid, again, I might be butchering several of these names and titles, so excuse me, also wrote a detective story in Metamorphoses. In the story, titled The Story of Perseus, the hero Perseus solves a mystery by finding a culprit who has been stealing women's clothing. In addition to these examples, there are many other ancient myths and stories that feature detectives or investigations of some kind, including the biblical story of Daniel and the Babylonian court, and the Norse legend of Sigurd and the dragon Fafnir. These stories have all influenced the development of detective fiction over the centuries, helping to shape the genre as we know it today. Now let's revisit why detective fiction emerged as an important genre in the 19th century. There was the growth of literacy. As literacy rates increased, more people were able to read and enjoy books and newspapers, creating a larger audience for detective fiction, as we can see from the on-screen data visual. There was also urbanization and the rise of crime, as I kind of mentioned earlier. The growth of cities brought with it new social problems, creating a demand for stories that could help people understand and kind of grapple with these issues. Additionally, there were some of those scientific advances that we talked about before. There's also the influence of other genres, and we can see that when we read a crime fiction story or really any story that is not just one story, but we see the different genres kind of bleeding into it. And detective fiction was no different. It was influenced by other popular genres of the time, like gothic fiction, sensational fiction, even adventure stories like Moby Dick. There was the development of some iconic detectives in the 19th century. There was the creation of Sherlock Holmes, Hercule Poirot, and Miss Marple, and these characters helped to establish many of the conventions of the genre and created a lasting interest in detective fiction. Overall, the rise of detective fiction in the 19th century reflected a growing interest in crime, its investigation, as well as a fascination with science, logic, and rational thinking. These factors contributed to the emergence of the genre as an important literary form and its continued popularity today. When you review the readings in the module, um, the lecture material, and the stories, you'll find uh, lecture material about 3 different authors and 3 different stories from these authors. 2 of the authors in the week 1 module are iconic old dude writers who heavily impacted crime fiction. We have Poe, pictured left, and Doyle, pictured in the middle. However, as we'll learn during the semester, crime fiction has expanded globally into so much more than these or similar writers could have ever envisioned. For that reason, we're going to review not just the tenets of crime fiction in the US or in the UK sense, but global crime fiction concepts, writers, and stories like the more modern story, Broken Monsters from South African writer Lauren Bukes. And this is a story excerpt that you can choose to read this week when you're completing one of the homework forums. During the course, we're going to review common literary theories and story terms to help you analyze stories. And some of those are pictured on the screen. We're not going to look at all of the things pictured on the screen, just a few of the easier or more common ones. And it doesn't mean to master this course, you have to be a master literary pro or that you even have to like reading. The concepts that you see on the screen, literary criticism or story terms, they're more like tools that I'm handing to you to help you build what is needed to complete the course. For each literary concept or term, there will always be short videos or explanations to help you understand that tool and how to apply it, like an instruction manual. The assignments for week 1. This week, you have several story excerpts to read or listen to. As for assignments, you have an optional worksheet titled Citing Sources Style Corner. Why should you complete an optional assignment worth 0 points? It's really great practice for acclimating to citing sources, which is necessary for this and other courses. You have a quiz to complete. Quizzes are always due on Saturdays, and they cover a variety of questions, most of them about the fictional or non-fictional readings from the module. Sometimes the questions are multiple choice, and sometimes you have to type in an answer. If you type in an answer, these will not be graded until I update and grade the entire quiz because I have to read your answer. Then you have 3 discussions. You usually are going to have just 2, but this first week there are 3. The first discussion is asking about the syllabus, or it might be asking about other things. It's just a way for student services to know you're participating in the course and then to release your stipend funds to you. The second discussion is titled Introduction. Basically, just tell the class a little bit about yourself using the insert video feature. And during this video where you're telling us about yourself, also discuss which two novels that you picked from the required Google Doc list. When you choose these stories, make sure you choose at least one story that is not UK or US based. You have to post the content for this introduction post by Saturday night. Your responses to peers are due by Tuesday. This form is also going to ask you to adopt a formatting method like APA or MLA. Just pick one method of formatting that you like, or maybe you're familiar with it. Stick with that formatting method for the entire course. The examples of formatting you see on the screen are used when formatting major assignments like papers. You're not going to have to do this for forum assignments, because forum assignments or discussions are going to ask you to include in-text citations to back up points that you've made. Part of choosing either MLA or APA means that you're going to understand the difference between these citation methods as shown on the screen. So for instance, when you cite an MLA quote or paraphrase, you only need author last name and page number, like we see on the left side of the screen. The right side of the screen, we have APA where you need last name, you need the year, and you need the page number, and you're going to include P dot. For MLA in-text citations, you do not use P dot for page number. So there's these little differences that you're going to have to remember. Lastly, the third discussion asks you to compare and contrast two stories from the module you choose. You could choose to compare and contrast the Poe and Doyle stories, or Poe and Bukes, or any combination of those three stories. This forum is a way to practice for Project 2 later on, because Project 2 is going to ask you to compare and contrast two stories from the course. In this last discussion, you're going to practice integrating an in-text citation from one of the stories. We discussed about having to choose MLA or APA. This forum is asking you to use one of those citation methods to add a quote or paraphrase to your forum post. And rather than just dropping that quote or paraphrase into your discussion, attempt to integrate the quote by using the author's name openly in the sentence, like you can see on the screen in the boxed examples near the top of the screen. To learn more about quote integration, visit the link in the discussion, which features more examples. And you have to post the content for this by Saturday night, and your responses to peers are due on Tuesday. Each discussion has a rubric. Whenever I grade discussions, I include a list of what I reviewed and if you met these expectations or not, based on the assignment, explanations, and the rubric. If you have any questions about the module or a specific question about an assignment, don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks for reviewing this video lecture, and have a great rest of your week.